Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital recap for Wednesday, March 25th, reveals that Marco Rios faced a fatal outgrowth while Jason Morgan exited thanks to the WSB's nippy action. Britt Westbourne managed to squeeze in one final protestation before that happened, so then's how it all played out. At GH, Ross Cullum pulled through his surgery and was transferred to recovery. Jack Brennan and some other WSB agents showed up looking for information, but Lucas suggested it'd be many hours before Cullum woke up. After effects went wrong in the trauma room with Isaiah Gannon and Elizabeth Baldwin, Liz approached Lucas with grim news. Once Elizabeth admitted Marco was dead and suing multiple stab injuries, she did her stylish to offer Lucas comfort. Lucas sought a moment alone with Marco's cadaver and cried over this being his fault. The croaker felt responsible for making Marco prove his love when they should have just run down together. At Windermere, Ava Jerome was willing to play by Jen Sidwell's rules since he didn't want to be tied down to one woman. Still, Ava felt confident she could rise to the challenge and prove she was woman enough for Sidwell. Harrison Chase intruded Ava and Sidwell's make-actual session with word on Marco's pecking, so Sidwell and Ava rushed to the sanitarium. Isaiah informed Sidwell that he did all he could for Marco, but he'd lost too important blood and his injuries were too severe. Sidwell questioned if Isaiah would sabotage the surgery to get back at him and eventually demanded to see Marco. Once Sidwell wept over Marco's dead body, he decided his gashes weren't what his son demanded now. Sidwell angrily pledged to make Sonny Corinthos pay for Natalia Ramirez's death and now Marco's. Back with Lucas, he originally defied comfort from Ava since that would make Marco's death real before worsening in her grasp. At home, Rocco Falconeri recapitulated how he followed Britt to the pier before Cullum pulled a gun on her. Rocco also admitted to Lulu Spencer that Jason showed up and plotted with Cullum, who dropped his gun. Since Cullum had another armament and was about to attack Jason, Rocco snared up the gun and fired at him. Lulu assured Rocco that she was going to take care of everything and headed to the sanitarium with him. That led to Lulu giving Liz a bogus story about Rocco cutting himself in the kitchen so he could get medical attention for his hand. At Carly Spencer's place, Danny Morgan and Charlotte Cassadine showed up looking for help from Valentine Cassadine. Since Charlotte and Danny assumed Jason was still a fugitive, Charlotte allowed. Perhaps Valentine could help Jason while he was on the run and point him to safe houses. Alexis Davis ultimately got Danny on the phone and let him know Jason had been arrested for shooting Cullum, so he pushed his grandma to help his pater. Since that's what Sam McCall would want. Danny disconnected and hoped to see Jason, but Valentine and Carly pushed him to go home for now. Charlotte took Danny to the police station anyway after they parted ways with Carly and Valentine. As for Valentine and Carly, they did some strategizing once they were alone. Valentine suggested that formerly Jason was condemned, he could use his Switzerland connections to arrange for Jason's escape and conveyance. Until also, Valentine and Carly planned to concentrate on proving Cullum was dirty. At the PCPD, Jason continued to stonewall Dante Falconeri, who spoke with ADA Justine Turner about the confusing case since Jason had been so reckless. Alexis arrived as Jason's attorney at Danny's request and filled him in on all the Marco horror. Jason allowed. The stylish thing Alexis could do now is step over for Danny, especially since he was trusting her to be Danny's legal guardian. Dante assumed all this had commodity to do with Britt, so Nathan West was assigned with getting Britt's statement at the sanitarium. Britt claimed Jason shot Cullum after flashing back he told her to say that. Still, Britt claimed Jason was guarding her after Cullum wearied her and demanded to see Jason write down. Back at the PCPD, Brennan and some other agents showed up to extradite Jason incontinently. The agents made it clear this could be considered a transnational incident and that they were under no obligation to tell Jason where they were taking him. Dante, Justine and Alexis tried to protest, but there was nothing they could do. Jason was led out to the van in the parking lot, where Britt rushed over and declared her love for Jason. Jason let Britt know he loved her too as he was loaded in the van for transport. Danny also came rushing over with Charlotte and had a meltdown as he realized the WSB agents were taking his pater down. General Hospital spoilers say Jason's exit will continue to drive the drama in Port Charles, so stay tuned. General Hospital recaps for Wednesday, March 25 reveal Charlotte Cassadine and Danny Morgan sought Valentine Cassadine's help. Away, Rocco Falconeri confessed all to Lulu Spencer, and Marco Rios failed in surgery. Charlotte and Danny sought Valentine's help as Alexis Davis desperately searched for her missing grandson Danny. Charlotte brought him to Carly Spencer's home, believing that Valentine could help Jason Morgan in fleeing the city. Valentine inquired about the WSB's arrest leave for Jason, and Danny mentioned that no bone sounded to have the answer. Ultimately, after responding to his grandmother's call, Danny discovered that Jason had been arrested for shooting WSB director Ross Cullum. After contending with Alexis to help his father, Danny participated the news with Carly, Valentine, and Charlotte. Valentine concurred with Carly's view that if Jason shot Cullum, it must have been out of necessity. Charlotte tried to console Danny, saying at least his pater was end on the run and hopefully he'd be home soon, but Valentine and Carly changed a regard, apprehensive that this was doubtful. Valentine came up with a plan. Carly and Valentine recommended that Danny return home, but rather, Danny asked Charlotte to take him to the PCPD to visit his father. Carly was determined to see Jason, but Valentine converted her against it, clarifying that security would be veritably tight since Jason was indicted of shooting a WSB agent. Confident that Jason would ultimately be set up shamefaced and transferred to Switzerland, Valentine proposed using his connections to help Jason escape during transport and go into caching. In the meantime, he noted, this would give them a chance to prove that Cullum was a double agent. Dante advised Jason and Nathan gave advice at the PCPD. Dante Falconeri advised Jason that the charges related to shooting a high-ranking WSB functionary in the reverse were different from his former apprehensions. Nathan West advised Jason to suppose precisely about his coming move, as it could decide if he'd spend the rest of his life in captivity. Frustrated by Jason's silence, Dante left to speak with Justine Turner. While they were alone, Nathan indicated to Jason that he'd handled the situation with Danny, also proceeded his part as the questioning operative. As Justine and Dante observed from the window, she questioned why Jason didn't run down incontinently. Dante and Justine discussed why Jason was carrying so else. Dante suspected it might be related to Britt Westbourne, who had been unconscious at the scene, and Justine claimed they demanded to get Dr. Westbourne's statement right down. They transferred Nathan to General Hospital to speak with his family, instructing Detective West to follow protocol. Soon later, Alexis arrived at the station, averring on seeing her customer Jason aloud. Diane Miller had transferred her. But she streamlined him on what happened when she and Danny set up Marco after the pecking, revealing that Danny had contended with her to help his father. Chase notified Sidwell and Ava about Marco. While Marco and Cullum were in surgery at Windmere, Ava Jerome participated a story with Jen Sidwell about falling off the Alcazar, leading to a kiss. They were intruded by Patrolman Harrison Chase, who brought bad news Marco had been picked. Chase asked Sidwell if he knew anyone who would harm his son. Meanwhile, during surgery, Cullum's blood pressure fell, but Lucas Jones managed to remove the pellet and save the WSB director. Isaiah Gannon and Elizabeth Baldwin worked on Marco in the ER, closing most impale injuries, but a torn blood vessel caused internal bleeding. Britt frenetically demanded updates on Marco and Cullum. Britt frenetically demanded updates on Marco and Cullum from Portia Robinson, averring her life depended on it. Also flashed back Jason telling her to inform the police he shot Cullum. Portia returned with news that Marco was still in surgery and Cullum was critical but stable, egging Britt to lament that the WSB director was alive. Nathan also arrived to question his family. Britt explained that Agent Cullum had been bothering her and verified Nathan's dubitation. It was linked to her time in Croatia. She added that she fell and hit her head when trying to leave. Nathan told her Cullum had been shot and asked if she saw who did it, leading Britt to roar that Jason did it to cover her and demanded Nathan take her to see him. Marco failed after Cullum's surgery. Lucas informed Jack Brennan and two other WSB agents about the director, also tried to communicate Marco again. He left a communication for his swain indicating that Commodity had gone crazy with Jason and Britt's plan and advised him to brace for impacts. Soon later, Lucas met a grieving Elizabeth, who delivered the heartbreaking news that Marco had passed down. She took a devastated Lucas to say farewell to Marco, and the croaker held himself responsible for his swain's death. In the meantime, Portia assured Isaiah over the loss of his case. Jen suffered his son and swore vengeance. As Ava comforted Lucas latterly, when Ava and Jens arrived, Isaiah had to inform Marco's father of the woeful news, and a agonized Sidwell questioned whether Dr. Gannon had designedly meddled up the surgery out of vengeance. Jens wept as he bid a final farewell to his son, covenanting to make Sonny Corinthos pay for both Natalia Rogers Ramirez's death and now, Marco's. Outside the sanitarium, Ava set up Lucas, still in shock at Marco's death. Originally, he defied comfort, floundering to accept the reality of Marco's death, but ultimately, he broke down in his aunt's grasp. Rocco confessed all to Lulu. Rocco commended in Lulu about following Britt to the pier. He cried as he described seeing Britt with Lucas, also fighting Agent Cullum, and how he shot the WSB agent to cover Jason. Nathan and Jason covered for him. Lulu verified no bone differently saw him, and Rocco assured her that neither Cullum nor Britt knew he was there. Lulu made Rocco promise to keep it a secret and pledged to handle everything. Latterly, she took him to GH where they prevaricated to Elizabeth about his hand injury from a kitchen knife. The WSB took over Jason's case at the PCPD. Justine told Dante she demanded a strong case against Jason. Just also, Jack Brennan and 2 WSB agents arrived, stating they were taking Jason into guardianship and extraditing him incontinently. One agent manacled Jason in the interrogation room. Jack explained the order came from the top and that the WSB didn't have to inform Jason of his destination. He also told Jason that Cullum survived surgery but was in critical condition, prompting him to hope the director pulls through. Jack offered to call Carly and Danny for Jason to say goodbye, but Jason preferred they not see him like this. Alexis argued Jason's arrest was violating his human rights. Meanwhile, Alexis argued with the other WSB agent that Jason's arrest was a violation of his mortal rights, while Justine claimed her office had the authority to detain the suspect. Still, the agent stated that the WSB had precedence over original governance. He refused to reveal where Jason was being taken. As officers attended Jason out of the PCPD, he told Alexis he'd named her as Danny's legal guardian, and she pledged to fight the charges. Dante followed the group outdoors to oversee the transfer, and Justine snapped at Jack, asserting that Jason merited to be tried in Port Charles. When Brennan said she had been overbalanced, Justine riposted, "We'll see about that," and walked down. Nathan, Britt, Danny, and Charlotte all reached the WSB van before Jason was taken down. Jack told a stupefied Alexis that Jason would be long gone ahead. Justine could get a judge on the phone, meaning Danny would no way see his father again. Outside the station, Dante advised the WSB agents that they would be held responsible if anything went wrong during the transfer. Britt and Nathan also arrived, and she contended with Dante to help the WSB from extraditing Jason, but he scoffed, saying he'd no choice. Also, she and Jason tearfully expressed their love for each other. Just before the agents shut the van door, Danny and Charlotte reached the parking lot. Danny participated a sincere farewell with his father, while Dante and Nathan held him back as the van drove down. Be sure to catch up on everything passing with GH right now. Come back then frequently for General Hospital spoilers, news, and updates. The events unfolding in Port Charles carried a heavy, almost ceremonial weight, like a harsh baptism by fire for nearly everyone involved. Lives were changed in an instant, truths were buried under layers of lies, and emotions surged from quiet hope to devastating grief. What began as a tense day in the hospital corridors quickly spiraled into a storm of heartbreak, desperate decisions, and looming consequences that would ripple far beyond that single day. At General Hospital, there was a brief flicker of relief when Ross Cullum survived surgery. The medical team worked tirelessly, pushing past exhaustion and doubt to stabilize him. Once the procedure was complete, he was moved into recovery, giving the impression, at least on the surface, that one crisis had been narrowly avoided. But even in that moment of success, there was an undercurrent of unease. The arrival of powerful agents, demanding answers and asserting authority, cast a long shadow over any sense of victory. Lucas tried to maintain control of the situation, explaining calmly that Cullum wouldn't be conscious for some time, but the tension in the air made it clear that patience was in short supply. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hospital, things took a darker turn. The trauma room became the setting for a heartbreaking loss that would shake several lives to their core. Despite every effort, Marco could not be saved. The severity of his injuries proved too great, and the medical team was forced to confront the harsh reality that not every battle could be won. When Elizabeth delivered the devastating news, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her words were gentle, but they carried an unbearable weight. Lucas was shattered. The guilt hit him immediately, wrapping around his heart and tightening with every breath. He couldn't help but replay every moment leading up to this tragedy, questioning his choices and blaming himself for pushing Marco to prove his love. In his mind, things could have been different. They could have escaped, left everything behind, chosen a simpler path. Instead, he found himself standing beside a lifeless body, mourning not only the man he loved but also the future they would never have. In a quiet, deeply personal moment, Lucas asked to be alone. He stood there, grief pouring out of him, his sorrow unfiltered and raw. Tears came freely as he whispered apologies that would never be heard, wishing desperately that he could turn back time. It was a moment of complete vulnerability, a stark reminder of how fragile life truly is. Across town, at Windermere, a very different kind of drama was unfolding. Ava found herself navigating a complicated dynamic with Sidwell. Determined to prove her worth and unwilling to be dismissed, she accepted his unconventional expectations with a bold confidence. She believed she could rise to the challenge, that she could be exactly what he wanted. But their intense moment was interrupted by shocking news: Marco had been stabbed. The atmosphere shifted instantly. What had been playful tension turned into urgent concern. Without hesitation, Ava and Sidwell rushed to the hospital, where they were met with grim faces and even grimmer news. Isaiah explained that everything possible had been done, but Marco's injuries were too severe. There was no saving him. Sidwell's grief quickly transformed into suspicion and anger. He questioned whether the surgery had been sabotaged, his mind searching for someone to blame. But when he finally saw his son's body, the reality sank in. His sorrow was profound, yet it didn't remain soft for long. Instead, it hardened into something dangerous, a burning need for revenge. He made a vow, his voice filled with fury, promising that those he held responsible would pay dearly. Back at the hospital, Lucas struggled to process his loss. When Ava approached him, offering comfort, he initially resisted. Accepting her embrace felt like accepting the truth, and he wasn't ready for that. But grief has a way of breaking down even the strongest defenses. Eventually, he gave in, collapsing into her arms as the full weight of his loss crashed over him. Elsewhere, another secret threatened to unravel everything. Rocco confided in his mother, revealing a chain of events that could have serious consequences. He admitted to following Britt and witnessing a confrontation that quickly turned violent. When things escalated, he acted on instinct, grabbing a gun and firing to protect someone he cared about. The confession was heavy, filled with fear and uncertainty. Lulu understood immediately that this truth could not be allowed to surface. She reassured her son, promising to handle everything and urging him to stay silent. Together, they crafted a story to cover up what had happened, presenting a minor injury as the result of a harmless accident. It was a desperate move, but one they believed was necessary to protect him. At another location, concern and urgency drove Danny and Charlotte to seek help. Believing that Jason was still on the run, they turned to Valentine, hoping he could provide a solution. They were searching for safety, for a way to keep Jason out of danger. But the truth they uncovered was even more troubling: Jason had been arrested. Danny's reaction was immediate and emotional. He couldn't stand the thought of his father facing such serious charges. He reached out to his grandmother, pleading for her to step in and help. His voice carried both fear and determination, driven by a deep sense of loyalty and love. Even as others tried to calm him, he held on to hope that something could be done. Meanwhile, strategies were being formed behind closed doors. There was talk of escape, of using connections to orchestrate a daring plan should things take a turn for the worse. At the same time, there was a shared determination to uncover the truth, to prove that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. At the police station, Jason remained composed, refusing to reveal anything that could complicate matters further. Those questioning him grew increasingly frustrated, unable to understand his silence. To them, his actions seemed reckless, out of character. But Jason had his reasons, even if he chose not to share them. When Alexis arrived as his attorney, the focus shifted. She brought with her news of the tragedy involving Marco, adding another layer of emotional complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Despite everything, Jason's priority remained clear. He wanted to ensure that Danny would be taken care of, no matter what happened next. As the investigation continued, attention turned to Britt. Her statement would be crucial, and when she finally spoke, her words carried both truth and deception. She claimed that Jason had acted to protect her, framing his actions as necessary rather than criminal. It was a calculated move, one that aligned with a plan they had discussed earlier. But even as she stuck to the story, her emotions were genuine. She needed to see Jason, to be near him, to hold on to whatever time they had left. Her urgency was impossible to ignore. Then came the moment that changed everything. Powerful agents arrived with orders that overrode local authority. They made it clear that Jason would be taken immediately, no questions asked. Protests were raised, arguments made, but none of it mattered. The decision had already been made. As Jason was escorted out, the weight of the situation became undeniable. This wasn't just an arrest, it was a removal, a separation that could be permanent. Those who cared about him scrambled to reach him before it was too late. Britt arrived just in time, her emotions spilling over as she declared her love. Jason responded in kind, their exchange brief but deeply meaningful. It was a moment of connection in the midst of chaos, a reminder of what they meant to each other. Danny's arrival added another layer of heartbreak. Seeing his father being taken away was too much to bear. His reaction was raw and unfiltered, a child facing the possibility of losing a parent. Despite attempts to hold him back, his pain was impossible to contain. As the vehicle carrying Jason pulled away, it felt like the end of something, and the beginning of something else entirely. The consequences of this day would not fade quickly. They would linger, shaping decisions, fueling conflicts, and driving the story forward in ways no one could fully predict. In the aftermath, the people of Port Charles were left to pick up the pieces. Some were grieving, others were plotting, and many were simply trying to make sense of it all. Encouragement came in small, quiet moments, reassurances between loved ones, promises to fight for justice, and the determination to keep moving forward despite overwhelming odds. But alongside those moments of hope were darker currents. Anger simmered beneath the surface, threats were made, and the desire for revenge grew stronger. It was clear that this was far from over. If anything, it was only the beginning of a much larger storm. And so, as one chapter closed with loss and separation, another opened with uncertainty and rising tension. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges that would test every relationship and every belief. But in the midst of it all, one thing remained certain: nothing in Port Charles would ever be the same again.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. It really supports the channel, and if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss any of our upcoming update tips and exciting updates.